So I've sat down and made lists. Here are my excuses. I am in touch with my excuses. I know my excuses. And I'll make a list and there'll be 20 of them and they'll be valid. And I'll come up with one or two whys, but they are much stronger than any of those excuses, let alone, and even those excuses combined. And you're like, well, that sets me in a mindset of actionability.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Forziat of Take the Doughnut, here to help you get inspiration and get donuts. I'm a motivational keynote speaker, and today I am bringing you a Take the Doughnut interview with Bill Watterson, who is a writer and director whose projects include the feature film Dave Made a Maze. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, and, I didn't say it in the intro officially, but we are both Brown University graduates. So that is how this connection got made. And now we get to learn all about each other, or we get to learn about you, really, in this process.
I was looking for some brown gear to wear, but I found Dodgers gear instead.
Ever true, ever true. We're going to get into your life, but first I have to ask, what's your favorite donut?
So this is a complicated question. I'll be totally open book. I don't particularly have a sweet tooth. I did as a child. I don't now. But the first thing that I think of when I think of donuts is Madsen Donuts, Geneva on the Lake. My father waking up early. This is on the northeast coast of Ohio, pretty near the Pennsylvania border. From Cleveland, but we had a small house, have a small house on the lake. And I checked this morning, Madsen Donuts is still operating. He would get up early. It was probably 8 o'clock, but to me it felt like 5 o'clock in the morning because I was a teenager. And go to Madsen Donuts and get a box of fresh made that morning donuts. And of them all, my favorite was really simple. They just call it a sugar donut. So it doesn't have any glaze or anything like that. They describe it as light and airy, covered in fine sugar. And that was enough for me. And they were kind of small for donuts. They weren't like, oh, they weren't like, it's in your face. It was just this nice, they weren't going hard. This was the 80s. But now, having a daughter and being blocks away from California Donuts, open 24 hours, I love to buy for her the pink glaze with rainbow sprinkles.
Nice. Very good. I feel like you've been checking these websites very recently for this interview because you've got all of their marketing language so finely dialed in.
I like to be prepared. I don't like to show up empty-handed.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that you shouted out the shop as well. It's cool that it still exists, and I love that it's tied to a childhood memory for you. I feel like this dessert food has that happens a lot with donuts for some reason.
When you bring them home fresh made, they're still warm. You open the box, and the obnoxious kids who are sleeping in because their lives are so important at age 13. The smell comes upstairs, and it's not even about taking a bite. It's just about that whole experience. The question itself took me back there, and it felt selfish not to share that.
Oh, that's so cool. I love this. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I said just a little bit about you up front, but tell us more about yourself. Big picture, what should we know
Sure.
about you?
I'm still scared of everything. His big picture. Let's see. Went to Brown, very lucky to do so. Still actually in Los Angeles. From Cleveland, moved to Los Angeles after a stint in living in Dublin, Ireland, playing in rock and roll bands. I found rock and roll in high school and was in a band at Brown. And when I moved to LA, I was very lucky to discover that there was a huge Brown community here, and still with many of those friends to this day. People I met freshman year, I'm still close to, in contact with, spending time with, raising families together. But yeah, some of your questions brought back a lot of these memories. So I am a filmmaker and a writer working in, I don't know, say working in Hollywood, but what is Hollywood anymore? The cops.
It's
There are
nothing
they.
and everything.
Yeah, but your questions made me think about, and your whole platform made me think about when I was at Brown. I was asked by a friend's father, someone I really hero worshipped, loved very much, whom I got to know even better at Brown when I did a semester abroad in London, which planted the seeds for me being in rock bands in Ireland ultimately. Um, England and Ireland are two different places. I'm just saying. he asked me what I wanted to be, not in like a, you're hanging out with my daughter, whom I wasn't dating. What do you want to be? But just in an adult taking genuine curiosity in some 17-year-old schmuck, and I remember answering, well, I'd like to be in a rock band because I was playing in bands and played bass and stuff. I'd like to be in a rock band, but that's unrealistic. So, but I do have this creative bent. So I don't know, maybe advertising. And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You have to at least give it a shot. You could at least try. And I was someone who didn't, like I said, there's still a lot of fear. There's still a lot of resistance. There's still a lot of, that's a big mountain to climb, or that's the realm of someone else. I don't get to do that. I might like it and think it's cool, but that I don't get to do that. They get to do that. That was very much a mentality, and one that sometimes still creeps in today. But he said you have to, and to hear it from a responsible adult who's raised a family, has a beautiful home, to tell someone go be in a rock band, and not in so many words, but it was kind of earth shattering, and it changed everything. And I was able to tell him, he unfortunately passed, but I was able to send him, when I knew he was dealing with a terminal illness, I was able to write him a letter and tell him that, that put me on a path for the rest of my life. And it's not that my parents or my friend group, were discouraging or telling me I can't do this or you shouldn't do that. It was more, I don't know where the mentality of those sort of limiting thoughts came from. I always attribute it to rooting for Cleveland sports teams. There's a glass ceiling when you care about sports and you grow up in the city of Cleveland. And LeBron James finally shattered it, and I was literally on my knees with tears streaming down my face as a 45-year-old man. I don't even care about sports that much. I don't know why it's playoff season. That's why this is all coming up. But yeah, and I hadn't thought about Christopher in that moment in a very long time. But I do remember then that New Year's Eve, I was still a student at Brown. That New Year's Eve, I was ill. So I wasn't able to go out. Not that I was like partying or anything, but I wasn't able to go out. And I remember drinking fake champagne at home alone, in like a warm bath, which sounds like you're about to kill yourself, but and sort of toasting to myself, being like, you're going for it. You're going for it. And that I pivoted my entire mentality towards, at the time, being a rock musician, which took me to amazing places, including Ireland, right? I lived in Dublin, Ireland for 4 years playing bass in a really interesting, really creative, very original rock and roll band that I genuinely believed was going to change the world, and none of that would have been a possibility. It wasn't part of my mindset that I could be one of those people, and look, I knew lots of bands who went on to great fame and success and was not one of them, but I got to live that life of chasing it and being in it and just having all of these stories about touring and sleeping on couches and opening, meeting Blondie and getting her to wink at me, and like just all this crazy, random stories that come up out of nowhere, well, I don't go to cocktail parties, but whatever adults do, they just come up out of nowhere. And I'm like, I got to do that. I get to do that,
Yeah.
Whether or not there was a brass ring or a Grammy or a tour with fireworks exploding. I got to do that,
Well, at the end of the day, what you said to him was like, I want to be in a rock band. And you did that. You didn't say, I want to win a Grammy.
Right.
You seem
Right.
like you did the thing
Well,
you got what you asked for.
yeah, very well said. Which is a lot of what I've been thinking about and dealing with and remembering recently in terms of like the Hollywood path, But
Yeah.
also, as you said, significantly, I said I wanted to be in a rock band, and Christopher heard me.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so interesting. I've learned over the years, not that this is about me, but I've learned over the years to be very specific when you ask for something, because if you meant something else, but you said this, you might get this.
No,
You got the thing you asked for. It's so interesting. And that's
and
just,
then remembering that takes away some of any stink of failure or could have.
Mhm.
I reached for the brass ring and didn't get it. It's like, but didn't you want to ride on the carousel? Wasn't that the thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to
It
ride
was
on the
the
carousel.
experience.
What are you
Yeah.
choosing to focus on?
Yeah.
And you just refocused me away from in that moment, you refocused me away from, yeah, I opened for Blondie, I opened for the Strokes, I hang out with the guys from OK Go, but no one knows who I am. But it's like that, but that's not what I told Christopher I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I said I wanted to be in a band. I was in 7 bands, in
Yeah.
2 different countries, you know.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
So interesting. You know, that first, I feel like that first answer might have even dipped into some future answers here, but let me hit the reset button for those who've never seen a Take the Donut interview before. If you're wondering what we're doing here and why I've got donuts in my background, so Take the Donut is another way to say carpe diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. And for me, it comes from this strange thing that happened when I was at Brown, where I left an actual donut on a table, but it almost immediately became an object lesson in what it looks like to leave opportunities behind. So I don't want to do that anymore. I want to take the donut instead of leave it on the table. And so this conversation is actually all about going after goals, going after opportunities. And what does that really look like when we go to do it? And, it's different from person to person, but we're going to figure out for you, Bill, what that's like. So, how are you with going after goals? What's that process like for you?
I've been lucky in that as I mentioned, some fears, some limiting thoughts, but I have had a community of people who have seen things in me and encouraged me. Even the Dave Made a Maze is something that I'm very proud of. It exceeded expectations in terms of how well it did internationally and the awards that it won, and it flew me around the world where I got to meet incredible people, and not just fans, but other filmmakers and other creatives and people passionate about films from all over the world. Um, and that's incredibly lucky, and I'm still very proud of the film. Obviously, I try not to watch it anymore because I'm like, well, I'm better at that now. I would have done this differently. I wish we didn't have to deal with that limitation. So I don't parse it in that sense, but I do remain incredibly proud of it and its fan engagement many years on. But it's not like I charged out into the world and said, I need to make a movie. I'm going to make a movie. I'm a filmmaker, you know. That's not what happened. I used to make movies when I was a kid with a VHS camera, but it was not a direct through line. I had that big window where, as I mentioned, with music and everything, that's not something that I would do. I'm a fan of movies, but not only was it not like I love movies, therefore I'm going to be a director. I didn't know what a director was. Movies, even though I was making them with G.I. Joe figures and throwing fireworks at them, like it still seemed, and I watched making of, documentaries on Phil Tippett doing the Scout Walker stop motion nerd stuff. I still wasn't seeing a path. It still felt like something that just fell out of the sky, like manna from heaven. And frankly, I don't know if this might be an oversimplification, but the first time I came to Los Angeles is definitely one of the reasons I live here. But the first time I came to Los Angeles was to play at the now defunct Spaceland in a rock band called Uptown Sinclair. And of the bands that I was in, that one sort of had the most sort of industry buzz, like a solid review in Entertainment Weekly, some bigger shows, had a little bit of heat around it. And it was walking the streets of Los Angeles, just alone, wandering, that I felt a tangible sense of possibility of, oh, you can do that. Someone can do that. I knew people who were doing that. Staying with a friend who was, at AFI for cinematography. I visited with an old friend I'd known from my days in Ireland, an American guy, but he was living here, lived in Ireland briefly, and was living here. We became very close, and he was writing on the show Crank Yankers, and took me to set. And you start to realize it's so simple and obvious, but for someone who didn't grow up around it or is very far removed from it, it's just people going to work and doing their best. It's a job. But you can get very blue collar about it, and I found that so helpful to take it away from like this pie in the sky dream and tuxedos and private jets or whatever. People think about rock and roll. They think about all the things that aren't rock and roll to me, and I think I was doing that with movies, and just realizing this is people clocking in and working hard and doing their best. Those are things I can do. So it started to feel possible. It was just something I felt in Los Angeles that I had not felt in other. I didn't feel it in Ireland. I didn't feel it in Cleveland. I think I was too busy being a student and, sucking at making friends to be thinking about this kind of stuff at Brown. But uh, it really hit me as like, oh, you can, there is a living to be made. There's a path. And it's a big part of why I wanted to come and be here. But even still, with Dave Made a Maze, uh, Stephen Sears, who did the majority of the writing, and John Charles Meyer, who did the bulk of the producing, if not all of it, um, and certainly the fundraising. Um, we got together for a lunch. John had read Stephen's script and loved it. Stephen said, "Bill, I think you should direct it." Someone told me I should direct it. I did not. This was not me planting a flag. Look, I was directing web series that were leading to meetings and pitches, and I was directing a live vaudeville show, and I was doing it at a very high level. I thought, certainly, I felt very comfortable and felt like, oh, this is the culmination of music and pacing and timing and humor and community and creativity and all of the things that were sort of combining to give me a voice and a direction as a creative person. It made sense to be directing, to putting a team together, to be leading the team. But it was that meeting and them saying, and you should direct it, that put me on the path of directing my first film. And I got overwhelmed and I got terrified and I got tons of advice and I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's a big part of why the movie got made. Some of the fear that I wrestle with, I didn't have access to it because I didn't know what to even be afraid of. And it was too late. We were already on set and there were 70 people waiting for me to tell them what to do. It's too late, it's too late to be scared. The work needed to get done. And then you could really shift into that blue collar mentality of the work in front of you, the pieces of the work in front of you. That the producer at one point really pulled me off a cliff with that phrase. I'm sure you've heard a million times. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's something I'm really trying to. This ties nicely into some of what we were talking about where are you putting your focus, and it was about being in a band, not winning a Grammy. Grammys are BS anyway, but I'm trying increasingly now to really center on the idea of the goals are to just do the work itself. Mm. The goal is to write the screenplay. The goal is to write the short story. The goal is for it to exist in some fashion. The goal is not, and then once it's written, you can get into this person's hand and hopefully that person will contact this person and these dominoes will start to fall, or like, oh, if I write this kind of thing, maybe I can activate this part of my Rolodex. And it's like that, all of that kind of thinking puts the result in the hands of other people. And, the big part of the frustration of a career in Hollywood, either as an actor or as a filmmaker, it requires so many other people. Mm-hmm. Actors, you need to get picked. You need, that's a myopic way of thinking about it. But at the end of the day, if nobody picks you, you're not acting, and that's why you do things like start a theater company or do a one-person show or join, you do these other things to redirect and put yourself back in the driver's seat. But, we were building our own driver's seat to drive it for Dave Made a Maze. And that then you start winning these awards and you get agents and reps and you're going on these meetings in these huge fancy places and you think you're being taken along on a ride and you stop building your own driver's seat, So right now I'm really trying to focus just on the work itself as the goal.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there were all these different elements that came into that answer for you, and I think part of it is like you do creative things, and there's a really high concept there. But it sounds like for you, you're not comfortable living in that high concept forever, and actually, you would prefer to have some tangible steps in front of you that you can take and some actions to take. And so it seems like you kind of need the combination of those things. Like you want the creativity and then you want to put it in order.
Yeah, I think I'm a dreamer, which is why I have a fun imagination and why I was drawn to the Muppet Show and Raiders of the Lost Ark and these fun fantasy places. And that's not practical.
You're a dreamer, but also like a director. So I think there is that combination in you of dream and do,
I
and
think you
making
have
it
to have both.
all happen. And I don't know that everybody does. It seems like you do. I'm curious for you if if you're taking on something really big. And I can tell from your journey that a lot of things have sort of formed through evolution. But when you have something really big ahead of you, what keeps you motivated in the process, especially if you know you're going to be on this ride for a long time and there's a lot of
Right.
steps?
Um, I do get overwhelmed, but I do think that that focus on actionability is very motivating. In the short term, I sort of have two answers to that. In the short term, that helps with momentum, a to-do list. Like, well, yes, I want to direct this feature film in Ohio, but to get there, I need to get financing. To get financing, I need to have promotional materials. Promotional materials are something I can control. I can make a deck. To make a deck, I need a synopsis. I need a character description. And I need a finance plan. To get a finance plan, I need to speak to my producer friend. You know what I mean? And those become smaller and smaller, actionable things that unlock the next step. But if I just kept saying, God, I want to direct a movie in Ohio. I wrote the script. It's really good. I want to direct a movie in Ohio. I'll be saying that for the rest of my life. And the end result of my efforts will be a PDF that maybe three people read and not a movie. So the actionability I find motivating because that's something I can do. Especially, I think most people feel powerless in this current age. It's very chaotic. It's very scary. It's overwhelming. There's a lot coming at us every day, and we can feel very powerless.
Hmm.
An actionable list of things that I can do without having to make a phone call, without having to rely on another person, so I can't be let down. Um, that is motivating. I can do that. Great. Oh, once I did that, now I can do this. So it's those steps. I said it was twofold, and I've forgotten the second fold. Um,
Hmm.
oh, the other thing is in a more of a starting from scratch place. I was very lucky enough before I hurt my shoulder to be working with a boxing coach that I love, and whether he realizes it, no, he definitely realizes it. He's very gold-minded in his approach to the sport, and the things he says to get you through a round to keep you going. I just kept writing them down because I needed them. I needed to hear them, and they worked in the moment. Um, and then I've gone on to use them as bedrock things. So that actionability, he says this isn't the second fold. I'll get to the second fold, but this is the first fold. It's probably not how you're supposed to use the word twofold, but anyway, he says, "Don't hope and swing." Like, okay, you're boxing, and you're not just hoping and swinging. You aim, you fire. That gets you the result, and that keeps you from wasting your energy, and that keeps you focused, and that keeps you on a path towards the goal, which is making contact. Aim, fire. You don't hope and swing, you aim and fire. So that's sort of the actionability. Oh, I want to make a movie. I want to make a movie. Do you have a deck? Do you have a budget? Do you have a schedule? Do you have you know what I mean? I can do those things to get to the place where I'm making a movie and not being someone who's saying, I want to make a movie. That's the aiming and the firing as opposed to the hoping and swinging. Oh, maybe one day someone will recognize I'm so great. Or if I keep checking social media to see if anybody's still talking about the movie I released in 2017, maybe reposting that social media post will make someone be like, oh yeah, that Bill guy, he should direct our next movie, whatever. That's hoping and swinging. That's not aiming and firing. Aiming and firing is I need to do the synopsis for the deck, you know. So then the other fold, which I've used one, which is more sort of a blue sky starting from scratch thing, because as you say, these movies, any project, even a short film, becomes a massive undertaking. Even I directed a short film last month, and it's like more and more bodies kept having to be added to the pile just to get this thing to the finish line. Well, we need an effects guy, we need an animator, we need an editor, we need a sound designer, and that was just those are the people you don't even see on camera who aren't going to be there when we're shooting the film. And it's a short film, and the list just keeps growing and growing. So any sort of filmic project, if you're doing it, want to do it at a certain level, becomes a very big undertaking. And what I've fallen back on when it's more of a ground zero scenario is also from Justin Blackwell, the boxing coach. He says your whys have to be stronger than your excuses, not longer, stronger. So I've sat down and made lists. Here are my excuses. I am in touch with my excuses. I know my excuses, and I'll make a list, and there'll be 20 of them, and they'll be valid. And I'll come up with one or two whys, but they are much stronger than any of those excuses, let alone, and even those excuses combined. And you're like, well, that sets me in a mindset of actionability. I don't need to have the debate anymore. Why should I write the script? No one read my last one. No one, I haven't made money. No, no, no. I have so little time. I want to spend more time with my daughter. Why should I bother? And I'm not having the debate anymore. If you make the list of the whys and the excuses, you don't waste any more energy just having the debate. You either say, my excuses are much stronger. I'm not going to write that script. And I'm not going to think about it or worry about it. Done. Or you say, this one why completely outweighs all of these excuses. So I need to get to work right away. I spend no time on the debate. Should I do it? Should I not do it? That energy, that time is not wasted.
Well, when you've started moving towards something, you decide the why is strong enough, you start heading in that direction. I find a lot of times challenges come up, obstacles come in our way. And I'm curious for you if you've noticed a pattern. Is there a certain brand of challenge that comes up every time? Like no matter what you're doing, could be your personal life, could be your professional life, whatever arena, you're always going to see this Achilles heel rear its head. What is it for you?
It's probably rooted in insecurity and fear. Some of it is the pattern that I've noticed is I start panicking. It feels like too much. I'm seeing the elephant, not the bites. And I forget that I've been there before. Every project is different and has a different path. And you forget, wait a minute, I've been here before. I've done this before. Sometimes I will just look at my own website and body of work and be like, you got this. Look at what you've done. You're worried about this? You're fine. But yes, I will start to panic. Get those chest pains and my temper will go up. Sort of the worst of me starts to show up, and then I try to remember to pump the brakes and be like, if you're not enjoying this, don't do it, because I'm not getting paid well. I might eventually, but that's not where I'm at. So you'd better enjoy it. And then I try to remember those things, the actionability, the work, enjoy the work for the work's sake, doing the work feels good. I'm good at the work. It feels good to do something I'm good at. And just really keep my focus there and one bite at a time and not look at the elephant and just start to panic. I do know very specifically one of the panic triggers for me is that and this, even if you scale up, this remains true. I'm always working on such small budgets that I have a lot of guilt about engaging people that I know are worth more money than I'm able to provide. But then I try to remember, hey, I'm being paid less than everybody here. So it is about bringing this thing to life, and they'll want to work with me or they won't. And I'm not going to take it personally either way. Or they'll be available or they won't. And to not take anything personally, because my price points aren't great for the projects that I have. Now, the few times that I have been in a position to bring somebody on at a great pay rate is the best feeling in the world. It's the best feeling in the world to employ people. I remember when we were working on Dave Made a Maze, it was the height of the sort of sky is falling economic housing crash, and listening to NPR and all the stories about everybody being desperate and out of work, not unlike today. And I would drive to the production office with a spreadsheet of 50, 60 people we had employed that we were paying. And that was a great feeling. I didn't take a fee to write, direct, or the producing work I did or any of the post-production. And I invested my own money in it. So I did not make money from the film, but it was a great feeling. Even if our rates weren't great, it was a great feeling driving to the production office and looking at that spreadsheet of people that we had gotten under contract and employed. especially at that time, but anytime, you know. But that's one that I know when you talk about patterns. It's like, all right, there's a gigafoot, there's a gigafoot. Who do I call? I'm like, I just want to call him once and say, I got the money, I got real money for you. You did so much for me on so little last time, and now I got the money for you. I so badly want to make those kinds of calls, and sometimes I'm able to, um, but there's an element of guilt that comes into play because it takes an army, and you want that army well fed, well respected, and taken care of.
Hmm.
Because really, the director benefits the most from something existing, or the actor, so often. But the DPs are all working. They're brilliant. They don't need me. The editors, they're all working. They're brilliant. They don't need me at these rates. Um, so it is leaning pretty heavily on friendships and sort of getting back to just make sure you're enjoying it. Some of the joy of working on projects that take so many people is you get to be with so many friends.
Yeah.
You get to know people better, and you get to spend time with them again for the first time in a long time.
Hmm.
Um, and that's really nice. That's really nice.
Well, so when you look back on your life to this point, um, what would you say of all these things that you've been talking about, or maybe something you haven't? What's the biggest donut you've ever taken? The biggest opportunity you've said yes to? The biggest thing you've gone after?
There's no question that the biggest undertaking was the feature film Dave Made a Maze. I mean, I had never directed a feature film. It had stop motion, miniatures, puppetry. It was an ensemble, practical effects, tonal mashup. It's not like I'm making a comedy or I'm making a puppet movie or I'm making, tonal mashups are incredibly challenging. Horror, comedy, there's adventure elements. Um, and I had no credits, and we needed, several $100,000 to make the film. So there's no question that was the biggest one. But again, I have to go back to that meal at Palms Thai with Stephen and John. I didn't show up at that meal, to my memory. I didn't show up at that meal to plant a flag as a director to grab a donut. I showed up at the meal and they brought donuts. you know, I wasn't going to the donut shop, to hyperextend the metaphor. Um, uh, but I didn't shy away from the opportunity. I didn't say no. I didn't say no. Um, so I do want to give myself a little bit of credit there. There were plenty of reasons to say no. We had no financing. We had, the script was only 60 pages. I didn't know any of the stuff I knew by the time we were in production. Um, and yeah, but I do know. I mean, I remember an argument with my mother when I was selling men's and women's dress shoes at J.C. Penney's in Mentor Mall. I won a customer service award, by the way. Just kidding. Not kidding. That actually happened, but who cares? I was unhappy at the job, and I was talking about the reasons why I was unhappy, and then she was getting frustrated with me, and she said, "Well, then just quit." And then I came up with all the reasons why I couldn't quit, and it was my lunch break, and she got up from the meal and stormed out at me. She said, "Always with you, it can't be done." She walked away, and I felt terrible, but she was right. Um, that is a default of mine, which is why that lies and excuses thing kind of blew my mind, because I'm great at the excuses, super talented at coming up with very eloquent excuses that are, bulletproof. But why not be the person who comes up with even just one really good why?
Well, with that in mind, what's a donut you're taking right now?
um, yeah.
And we can see the war happen in your head as you answer this question.
Well, it's funny. I'm in post production on a short film, which was another donut that was like stuffed down my throat. It was a friend, very talented, very gifted friend, who came to me several times wanting me to direct this film, and I just, I had at the time the excuses were rock solid and made sense and had to do with family and bandwidth, and you know, I didn't feel like I could bring the positivity to the project that would have made it a joyful experience. The whys and excuses, I accepted the excuses. But this third time that he came to me, yes, and it was magic. It was magic. It's a beautiful film. We're editing it now, which is always a hair pulling experience. But very excited about the world seeing that. It's called Midnight City, and it's a beautiful film noir, which is a genre I love. And I got to work with some of my favorite people, and I just was never not happy to be with them doing what we were doing. So I'm excited for the world to see that. But the example I was using of the film shooting in Ohio and the deck, I was just finalizing the text for the deck for the promotional materials to shoot this film in Ohio to start reaching out to producers and fundraisers or producers and financiers and things like that. So that's the next biggest donut would be the next feature film, which to take it all the way back to your opening question is about the loss of my father. My co-writer and co-director Pete Levin, who's a brilliant stop motion director among other things. And this film has stop motion elements and miniatures similar to the sort of tactile filmmaking that I'm so drawn to. We both lost our fathers, and we wrote this together, and we're going to direct it together. And we're working on the text for the deck together, like arguing over how old the character's nephew needs to be, that kind of stuff. But that's the next biggest donut. And man, if I were to do the whys and excuses, the excuses would be even longer than they were last time because of the climate and our age and the financial realities of filmmaking and everything. But the why is just, it's an homage to our fathers. That's enough.
Seems like there's a lot in there for you and that project. It really does. My goodness. Who knows what you'll get from overcoming the excuses in that case.
And
I'm curious.
I've already gotten so much from just a relationship with Pete,
Mm,
examining our relationships with our fathers. Getting a big part of the writing process was just grieving again, telling each other stories about our dads and our relationships with our dads and what it felt like to lose them. That was a big part of just getting the clay on the wheel. And
mm,
just that. I'm not satisfied there. I'm way too ambitious for that. And I don't want to do the work if we're not going to stick the landing,
mhm.
uh, for better or worse. I think that's an engine that not everyone has, but it's not necessarily a source of happiness. If that makes sense, because you're unsatisfied until it's done. It's hard to enjoy the bites of the elephant. That whole metaphor goes all the way back to it. I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, okay, I took 400 bites of an elephant. Great. I want a skeleton with no flesh on it, a pile of bones on a giant cartoonish Looney Tune style plate. That's what I want. Instead of like enjoy this element tastes pretty good.
Yeah.
But to take my foot off that gas pedal for a minute, we and I have already gained so much from
Yeah.
as far as we got.
Well, there may be people who are watching this right now who have a donut of their own that they want to take, and it could still be an idea for them, or maybe they've started on the path towards doing that thing, but they're maybe looking for some inspiration along the way. So let's sprinkle some encouragement for them. And what would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, of course, what Christopher said to me, I would say to anyone now. That is something I would pay forward. Christopher Pratt again said to me, "Well, you have to at least try." And I'm also thinking of, I don't know if you've ever read James Clear's Atomic Habits. I also think of this wonderful anecdote of he hands a cigarette to two 30-year-old people, smoke their whole lives, both want to quit. And he hands a cigarette to one and he says, "Oh, I'm trying to quit." And he hands a cigarette to the other one and he says, "I no longer smoke." So they're both coming from the exact same path, but one has defined himself as someone who no longer smokes. One defines himself as someone who is trying and gives themselves the out of breaking down and taking the cigarette. I found that to be really helpful. In fact, to bring it back to, I was at the game last night, which is why my throat's all roached. There's a player on the Dodgers, Kike Hernandez, who every October is just much better player than he is the rest of the year. Significantly, like almost comedically, remarkably better player than he is the rest of the year. And he's been asked about it. And he got advice from Rich Hill, a pitcher, who said big time players come out in big time games. And he chose to be that guy. He chose to be that guy. He chose to be the guy who said, "I no longer smoke." Chose to be the guy that said, "I'm a filmmaker," as opposed to "I'd like to make a film." Chose to be the guy who said, "I am working on a film that will shoot in Ohio about my father," as opposed to "I'd like to make a movie about my dad thought, you know. And I just think it's a choice I have to make every day, sometimes every hour, sometimes every minute. But I just want to remind people it's a choice you can make.
Hmm. Beautifully said. I love that answer, the reframing to say this is what's happening, not just this is what I'm trying to do. For those who want to follow you on your journey, because you have so many exciting things you're working on right now, where can they follow you? What links should I put in the
Sure.
description?
Sure. I have the website of my writing and directing work at williamwatterson.com. I've gone back and forth about the whole Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes. Should I brand myself as William, but nobody calls me William? Anyway, so it's williamwatterson.com. And I do, although I'm trying to use it a lot less, I do most frequently use Instagram in terms of social. I'm on LinkedIn for professional connections. But back to the Calvin and Hobbes thing, I'm not that Bill Watterson on Instagram. And it's a public account, and I mainly use it to promote projects that I'm working on and playful things or share other people's work and art, or talk smack about baseball.
Mhm. Great. Well, everybody be sure to check out those resources. Lots to follow along with there. And if you liked watching this video, be sure to like and subscribe because there's so many inspirational interviews still to come. But in the meantime, Bill, thank you so much for taking some time for sharing your thoughts about your journey and also what going after goals looks like for you and can look like for other people.
I can't begin to thank you. It was wonderful for me to have to codify and think about these things again and tell them to myself again. That's incredibly valuable to me. So I thank you for that.
I'm glad it had that effect for you. And to everybody who's watching this, please go out there, get inspiration, and get donuts. Bye, everyone.